Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're going to call this meeting to order. So there's been a couple of changes to our agenda that I want to let everybody know about. First, we're not going to hear House Bill 306 today, but we are going to add a bill to the agenda, and that's House Bill 17. It's been recommitted back to us, and Chairman Powell is going to speak to us about that and explain what's going on. So whenever you're ready, Chairman Powell.
So much, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, you may remember this is a bill that we brought out of the committee last week, the chain of custody bill, and we added some language from another member that was basically anointed as being good for the system. Went to the House Rules Committee, and as a precaution, the same mode that was last year, Brian Tyson is the attorney that is representing the state in some of these election lawsuits. And they wanted to be absolutely sure there was nothing in that bill that would have any effect or to change any of the substance or anything of the lawsuits. I talked to Mr. Tyson. I talked to him about 1 o'clock, and he assured me that there was nothing in there that would have any effect. And I'd asked him to communicate as such to Keith Williams in the Speaker's office, and I relayed that to Chairman LaHood. And with that, no change of what we did last week, and I would ask the committee to move it back to rules.
Could you read the LC number just so we can all be sure we're looking at the same bill? I understand it's unchanged, but just want it for clarity.
Well, I'm not sure that I have the version we changed because it had some amendments in it.
I believe it's in your stack in front of you.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking. That's it.
Okay.
It does. Our good Molly has assured me that's what we passed out last week. I was looking for the language to be sure that the amendments were in it, but I take her at her word.
All right, so it's LC 472167S. All right, any questions? All right, I'll entertain a motion if there is one.
Move to pass. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, it passes. All right. Next we got House Bill 206 by Representative Saines. Chairman Saines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to present this bill to the full committee. I will not tell you it's a simple bill, but it is an important one. It is a significant tool we'd be giving to our economic development capacity, and particularly for my concern, it adds a benefit to areas in our state when they're facing natural disasters, when commercial properties are looking at rebuilding something already unexpected by their business model and profit. It gives them, because of the resiliency component, an added low interest tool. So backing up, the House Bill 206 creates a framework for commercial property assessed energy and resiliency CPACE financing. CPACE financing is done in the majority of other states. I believe 32 have it. You have several items in your packet, one being a one-pager sheet explaining the bill, the second one being a letter of support from the Georgia Municipal Association, the Georgia Hotel and Lodging Association, the Georgia Restaurant Association, and Georgia Association of Manufacturers. And those entities, with the exception of the Municipal Association, are supporting it because they see that their members can utilize this in moving projects forward. Again, there's a limit going through the bill. In Article 1, the definitions, line particularly 107 and 111, it limits what what a private property owner can get these private funds for. So we're not taking away what the majority of borrowing would be, which is in that mortgage, but it only allows for the financing of that improvement for the life of that improvement. Article 3 of the bill sets up, Article 2 creates the authority structure, and it's developed under the model that we already have in law, which is the Resource Recovery Development Authority, separate to the area of the law that creates downtown development authorities and then traditional development authorities. The reason we're creating a separate authority and a separate legal structure is because of the complexity of the financing. It was cleaner to do it this way, as well as giving added transparency to the process of loaning. No government in the state who doesn't want to entertain these kind of loans has to. The local either city or government or county would have to create the authority first to make these loans accessible, or this financing accessible, and then after the deal has been developed, it would have to go back towards that city or county for final approval. That being said, I'm sure there's questions from the committee, and I will say we have folks available who did a great job yesterday, particularly Mr. Taylor, a partner in Nelson and Mullis, who's been instrumental in the bill development. If there's additional questions about the technicality of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation yesterday and today. And I'd like to clarify with kind of a question to you, but just want to be clear. This is a voluntary program, right? And it's market driven. In any private property owner who chooses to pursue this path will pay the administrative and fees that are associated with the process, correct?
Yes, sir. We're using a public framework for the collection and the development, but it is 100% private dollars, 100% the property owner who's requesting it and has the right to utilize it. The government's involved by individual transaction, have the ability to approve it. And also the governments have the ability to recur any administrative costs associated with the transaction as well.
Okay, thank you. We have a question. Is that you, Representative Gullett? All right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Saines, presenting the bill. I do have a couple questions, and I'm kind of familiar with this. Last year I had a bill that opened up this code section and wasn't kind of just tabled, and so there was a lot of talk about what would go on with CPACE to open that code section up. So I'm pretty familiar with it. One of the things we keep talking about is, it's interesting, is actually in this committee and not really like a banks and banking type of committee, but I get it, it's an authority. But what this does do is, although all the manufacturers, the people who would make money on implementing these changes are supportive of the bill, this does take a superior lien authority away from the banks, right? So if I'm a bank and I've loaned this money out, or a credit union, I've loaned this money out, now the second thing that's coming through for an enhancement now gets the lien authority on that loan. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can answer the question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Representative Gall. My light's still on. Thank you for the question. I know you're familiar with this field. Yes, it does get that priority, which a bank would, through the modifications we've made, if they already have a mortgage, would a private property owner would have to go to their bank and get a written approval to do so. So it's not something the bank would lose the right to refuse in that matter. And as well, if it's a new mortgage, it would the notice would be there that the bank would be aware to make that. And it's a very limited scope in terms of what a CPACE loan is eligible to have. So we are not creating a structure to where the majority of debt would be transferred to a CPACE loan. However, we're making projects that might otherwise be unaccomplishable in addition and enhance to the property above code, making it accessible to these individuals. And I will modify what you mentioned, that the individuals supporting it are those who are benefiting. The hotels and restaurants in particular are doing so because their members are They see that this is an opportunity for their members to enhance their buildings, which enhance the quality of not only our residents but our tourism attraction, as well as it being a tool, an economic development tool through our authorities that cost no dollars to our state, tax dollars that enhance our ability for local governments to attract properties, business to come to their community. But I do agree with you that there is they do take first priority. That's a part of the model.
Right. And so these institutions who've lended the money, if I can follow up, Chairman, I'm sorry. The institutions who've lended the money up front, now there's something that's happened afterwards that kind of blows up the whole priority of paying the lien. I think we agree on that. You're saying that the banks or institutions have to sign off on that. So we'll look at that. As far as is there a prepayment penalty if they pay these off early?
I believe the law allows for that, but it would have to be from the initial term of the transaction. So it'd be within the agreement that all parties are in favor of initially. It can't it'd have to be developed at that point. The law does not require it; it just only allows for it.
Okay, and then one last question, Mr. Chairman. Foreclosure process. So, can you tell me about the foreclosure process of how this will work if there is a priority lien and if there is loans outstanding for the property?
Just so I don't speak out of turn, I have not gone through that. If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, to ask Mr. Taylor to walk through a foreclosure property for a transaction.
Sure. So Mr. Taylor did present at subcommittee yesterday, so if you'll be brief as you can, and we might take a question or two, but let's see. You should be on. Go ahead.
Okay. So it's treated under law like a tax lien, so it's foreclosed just like a tax lien if there's a foreclosure. It can't be accelerated. It's just for the life of the assessment, it's a fixed amount like a property tax that stays on the property. And if the property goes to a tax sale or a sale to enforce the assessment, it piggybacks off the same provisions as Georgia law, the tax liens piggyback off of. And just to reiterate your other point about the lender with an existing lien, the legislation provides that none of the transaction documents can be executed until an existing lien holder, your bank, consents in writing to all the terms of the transactions, including any prepayment penalty. So your existing lien holders are protected under this legislation. If they can nix one of these transactions by just withholding their consent. For new construction, where there's not a mortgage and a mortgage holder later comes on, the notice of the lien is in the property tax records. So when they do their credit underwriting, they can decide whether they want to make a loan on a subordinate basis to one of these assessment financings or not when they do the new loan. But existing loan holders can nix the transaction by withholding their consent.
Are you number 28? All right. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So, is there a deficiency judgment process related to that then?
It works like a tax lien. It's if the property holder has defaulted, they're gonna sell the property at tax sale.
Right.
And then the property the whoever buys the property is gonna be responsible. Well, at the tax sale they'll wipe out the lien and pay whatever the property will produce for the assessment, but the original party liable for the assessment, again, this is not my area of expertise, it works just like a tax. I believe they're still responsible for the assessment as well as the tax.
So a tax sale happens and they get less money than the value of whatever the debt is, right? That's
right.
And so if $300,000 and they get $270,000 back on the sale, there's $30,000 that say the bank is short.
Right.
The priority would go to the CPACE lien, whatever that is. I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not sure if there's
Right.
a cap on that, but say that's $30,000, and say the bank is now out $60,000 or
Right.
okay. So deficiency would allow them to then collect $60,000 from the owner of the property, right? So
Right.
you believe that the money would go to the CPACE, the $30,000 debt to CPACE, and then the $270,000 debt would then be paid by the remainder, so it would be $230,000 applied to that. So
Yeah.
then the $60,000 would then be able to have a judgment from a judge, basically to say you owe this $60,000 in addition to giving up your property.
Right.
And
It's
so you
just
believe
like-
that still is a process that will happen if this goes into effect?
Yeah, if I default on my home mortgage, if my house is sold, there's not enough money to pay the taxes, I'm still responsible for the balance of the taxes, and
But Nat, is that the priority?
If my mortgage holder my mortgage holder, if the property had produced enough money to pay the taxes, there's no money to pay the mortgage, and now my mortgage holder and the tax collector comes after me for the balance
But the tax collector gets paid first.
out of the proceeds of the foreclosure. But once there's your deficiency, again, you're getting me a little beyond my area of expertise. But once there's a deficiency, I'm pretty sure that the mortgage holder and the tax collector are just parity. If I file bankruptcy, they're on a parity basis, coming against me as an unsecured creditor because the collateral has been wiped out by the foreclosure, by the tax sale.
Okay, now maybe you took me out of my area. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we have a couple questions. I'm going to go to Representative Fleming.
Counselor, so I have some understanding of development authorities. And as I understand it, we're about to create a new development authority which is specifically focused on rehabbing commercial buildings for the purpose of energy conservation. Is that a decent summary?
Yes, yeah. The CPACE program is so specialized, water and energy savings and resiliency, but when you combine the city and county's participation through intergovernmental contracts, they have to levy the special assessment, pay it over to the development authority. It really demands its own statute. And the Constitution authorizes the General Assembly to create development authorities. So in 1963, the General Assembly exercised that power to do the Development Authorities Law. 1978, they created Resource Recovery Development Authorities. 1981, my old boss wrote the Downtown Development Authorities Law. So this is the fourth exercise of that power to create a fourth type of development authority. The legislation, Article 2, was modeled in large part on the Resource Recovery Development Authority Law, so we're not plowing too much ground on the language that the legislature's used before. The Article 3, the Cooperation Law, is patterned off of the Housing Cooperation Law that's attached to the Housing Authority statute that allows cities and counties to cooperate and enter intergovernmental contracts with their housing authorities to support housing projects. In this case, they enter into intergovernmental agreements that are required to be paid solely from the special assessment on the private property to get the money over to the development authority to pay off the debt the development authority will incur to finance the improvements.
So you literally add a mill or two to this particular property's tax bill to cover the payments for the municipal bond that was issued to make these changes?
Yeah, it'll just be a special assessment just on the property owner who is requested to participate in the program, and whatever the legislation provides that the value of the assessment cannot exceed 25% of the appraised value of the property. That was something the bankers requested, but I haven't run the math. But these things, and they also the term of the financing can't exceed the weighted average life of the improvements being made.
So the taxing authority of the city or county which activated this type of development authority would not be ever encumbered upon
That's
to
correct.
repay the municipal
In
bond?
fact, the definition of intergovernmental agreement in the law defines an intergovernmental agreement as payable solely from the special assessment levied by the city or county. So the law provides that even if they wanted to, they could not use any other taxes or public funds to make the payments under the intergovernmental agreement over to the development.
So last
authority.
question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So the, obviously the reason you want to issue a municipal bond to build a building is because you can borrow money a lot cheaper that way.
Well,
Generally speaking, correct?
well, actually, under the federal tax code,
Yeah.
these projects are not eligible for tax-exempt finance, which is normally why we use development authorities. But what the benefit of this is we're piggybacking off the provisions of Georgia law that allow special assessments to be treated as tax liens. And
Okay.
because you have that super priority lien, you get attractive financing terms. And given the complexity of Georgia law, really the only way to do that is through an intergovernmental agreement tied with the development authority. In a simple world, we would just have a city or county impose, in other states, impose the special assessment, borrow against it, pay against the special assessment. I can't do that under the Georgia Constitution without a voter referendum every time you do one of these transactions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a couple more questions. Representative Ola Leahy. C-15.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Just a point of clarification on what these authorities can and can't do. So you're saying the role and function of an authority is limited specifically to the qualifying improvements in this bill?
That's correct. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question, Chairman? Are there any other states that have a similar authority set up?
Yeah, there are a few states. We're representing the CPACE Alliance, which is the alliance of CPACE lenders along with DV and Green Capital. And so this has been implemented in 34 states, and each state constitution is a little bit different. In some cases, they can do it the simple way, like just have the city or county issue the debt, which we can't do because of the Georgia Constitution. There are some other states, and I forgot off the top of my head which ones they told me, have to use this type of structure with authorities to avoid the referendum requirement in their constitution, which is similar to the Georgia Constitution referendum requirement.
And I know you just spoke to the benefits. So have there been any challenges or hangups that those states have run into that you've learned from?
In the early days of PACE lending, going back 15, 20 years maybe, it started as residential. And there was no requirement that you get the existing mortgage holder or lien holder consent to the financing. And so it got real controversial with the lending community because all of a sudden they were getting their lien trumped without their consent by a superior lien. Yep. And so the federal agency that insures residential mortgages just refused to insure a mortgage that had a CPACE financing on it. So that pretty much killed residential PACE. In the commercial sector, they wised up and decided that it was just going to be too controversial to continue doing these programs without getting the existing lien holder consent. So in recent years, like we've done in Georgia, we provide that in the legislation, you can't enter into one of these transactions and sign the contracts without the written consent of any existing lien holder on the property. So that's been the main controversy, but that goes back a number of years. And as the program has evolved and they've added the consent requirement for the mortgage holders, the controversy is, there's really been no controversy associated with these programs. And I pretty much have followed it. I've been following these things through the financial press since the inception 15 or 20 years ago.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, thank you. Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to go over a little bit of this. I've actually had this and seen it up close and talked to some of our developers and bankers at home, and they like the idea because it's going to allow them to put in things that we've seen we needed, extra hurricane protection and some of the green protection, and it's a better way for them to finance it. So we're going to get some projects done that we may not have been able to without this. Thank you.
Yeah, I started working on these energy savings deals back in the 90s with public housing authorities, and HUD, to incentivize the public housing authorities around the country, had a utility allowance they gave their housing authorities. And they said, we know you can't afford these energy savings improvements, but we will freeze your utility allowance for 12 or 15 years to give you to give you a revenue stream to lower your utility costs through more efficient improvements. And I was doing financing transactions with public housing authorities all over the nation where we did these type of improvements. They lowered the utility bills, but they froze that utility allowance, and that extra money allowed them to pay off the financing. And that's what a lot of these people find. They can't afford to improve their property without financing it over time. And an easy and cheap way to financing is with this super priority lead, the special assessment.
All right, thank you. Representative Oliver, did you still have a question? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Taylor, who's been very, very helpful in these discussions of something that's a little bit complicated. You and I have gone back and forth on the issue of bonding authority of these new development authorities. The bill on line 213, line 223, line 256, et cetera, only refers to revenue bonds. And in the context of this development authority, it's explained to me that the revenue bond, because I think of a revenue bond as like the World Congress Authority building a parking deck and the parking deck paying for the bond. How is it in this context?
So a revenue bond is an old term that's been around the law in not only Georgia but a lot of other states for God, over 100 years. It basically what it refers to is a financial obligation with a limited source of payment. In other words, the holder of that financial obligation, whether it's a bond, a note, or another financial instrument, only has recourse to the revenue stream pledged.
And in this context, who's the revenue stream pledge comes from?
So the special assessment is levied imposed by the city or county. There's an intergovernmental agreement that says the city or county agrees to pay the special assessment over to the authority. The definition of intergovernmental agreement prohibits them from using any source of money other than the special assessment to make that payment to the city or to the authority. The authority then can issue revenue bonds, notes, or other types of obligations payable solely from that special assessment. There's no other source of funds the authority could use for a particular transaction on a financial obligation, whether it's a revenue bond or a note. It's just a limited obligation payable solely from the revenue pledged to back that obligation.
Thank you.
All right, looks like that's all the questions. Does anybody want to make a motion? Oh, we have a motion. Second. And a second. Any discussion? All right, no discussion. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, got one opposed. So looks like the bill passes. And we have one more bill on the calendar, on the agenda today, and the presenter should be walking in any minute now. Yeah, we can be at ease for a couple minutes. Okay, everybody, there seems to have been a little mix-up with the sponsor of the next bill, so we're going to be adjourned.